Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining and taking the time out of your busy days. We obviously are tackling the consumer duty today, and it's an all-encompassing piece of regulation. So there's lots to cover. What we aim to do is, rather than just be show tell, is give you some takeaways that you can apply to your business today, tomorrow, and ongoing to make sure that you're going to hit your deadlines that the FCA have prescribed. So that's certainly a month to go until October, and then we've got April, and then we've got July next year. And we will also, as a RegTech, talk about data, because Model Office, really what we're interested in is governance, risk and compliance, and how we can bring together all the data into one area, so that into one hub, if you like, so that firms can get all the evidence, the management information, and high quality data that they can assess diagnostically how they're doing, not just about against the consumer duty, against all the rules and regulations in one place. And then most importantly, get gap analysis, get alerts, get diary integration with third-party technologies, so we can streamline regulatory reports. And so firms know where they are against the rules. They can obviously give all the evidence that they are complying and what they're doing to comply, and also reduce costs and time along the way. More of that in a little while. We also are delighted to have Helen Clark on today. Helen is an associate Model Office, but also runs her own excellent project management consultancy, Mint Blue Consulting. And Helen will talk about the importance of project planning a bit later on, once we've gone through the rudiments of this particular piece of regulatory directive. So without further ado, really the key areas regarding the regulation is that first and foremost, it's hopefully not going to scare you, a bit like Monk's Scream here. What we want to do is ideally inspire you so that you are beginning to understand the reasons behind the introduction of the consumer duty, to also know and understand the UK regulatory drive to what we call personalization, or a new relationship economy, knowing your clients better than ever before, client-centric businesses and so forth, to know and apply FCA outcomes-focused regulatory framework and how it applies to your firm's practice, understand and prepare your firm for the new consumer duty deadlines, and be aware of how RegTech can help, and project planning as well, how that can help you along the way. The reason obviously we put the learning objectives up is that you get CPD with this as well if you want it. We will send out a survey at the once this is finished to you, and you can check if you want CPD or not. So really, I think it's important to take a look at where we are with this, why this exists, this piece of regulations. It's a lot of people view this as diktat, but I don't buy into that. It's really, if you look at its progression, certainly since the financial crisis in 2008-9, of the FCA focusing on the industry, taking more ownership, accountability, responsibility, almost becoming self-regulatory in its approach. And that basically means that, treating customers fairly is well, I guess, deemed as partial success. It's probably, in my view, failed in more ways than one, because the TCF was introduced in 2001, but by 2007, it was clear it wasn't particularly working that well. And so if you remember back to then, the FCA introduced more outcomes-focused, I think it was 6 customer outcomes, to provide more controls to influence better results. But it was clear that there were still major issues going on an ongoing basis in the industry. So then you had, RDR come through, you've had the senior management certification regime come through, more emphasis on the asset management industry, on transparency of charges and costs, advice suitability, and now you've had the new FinProm rules, and now here we are with the consumer duty. Certainly in 2021, the FCA's chair, Charles Randall, presented a speech where it was about moving to measure outcomes against standards, and want to see that the firms are meeting client expectations on an ongoing basis. So that's where we are with it. It's also it has a political agenda, which I'll talk about in a little while. But certainly the regulator are viewing certain products and services not fit for purpose in delivering the benefits clients should reasonably expect, and are they appropriate for the client needs? Products and services don't represent fair value, where benefits consumers receive are not reasonably relative to the price that they pay. Poor client services that places barriers and hinders clients taking timely action, need to be identified and remedied pretty quickly. And information asymmetries, the one size fits all, days are over, where you might have one charging structure, one service, one platform, or whatever it is for all your clients. That certainly won't cut it now with the consumer duty, when you've got to assess really where clients are on their journey. If you think about it as a distribution chart, where you've got the clients coming up on their runway to retirement, you've got them at retirement, and then beyond retirement, you can't really make a case anymore for having one service with one fee for clients on different journeys. So that needs to be addressed as well. And finally, but not least, you've got the clients in vulnerable circumstances that we'll talk about. Now, the interesting thing with the FCA is that they have moved quite considerably since the days of really enacting principles-based framework, where they effectively say, here's our framework, you go and play and we'll come and see you. Now it's getting more proactive. They've got more tools and interventions, but they've also now looking at outcomes, metrics and targets. So if you think about the old days of compliance, 10 years ago, it was all about, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Well, now they're a data-led regulator, and that's moved to, if you haven't got the data, it didn't happen. And if you've got the data, it better have happened. That's the mantra. Certainly it's our mantra at Model Office. So really, from that point of view, it's looking at the obligations of you, of other market participants in the distribution chain, which we'll talk about, how you're measuring other participants and how that's affecting your clients and so forth. Because you think about planners and wealth managers and advisors, they do great work. You're already doing a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, but it's about bringing it together and evidencing it, but also going above and beyond in certain areas. So, for example, how you're engaging and how your relationships are across that distribution chain. So that's going to be important too. How you're outsourcing as well. We'll talk about that a bit later. And any M&A activity that's going on in the marketplace, which has been very strong over the last few years, how that's going to be affected by the consumer duty. So when we talk about where the industry is at the moment, we're seeing really a fight for obviously client personalization. It's really clients are front and center of everything, and really that's all what the FCA are here for. It's all about consumer, avoiding consumer detriment, fair markets, and so forth. And so you look at these four areas: technology, regulations, products and services, and clients, and the segmentations processes that have come through. It really is all about ensuring now that good outcomes are delivered across these four key areas and how it blends together. So no longer can we look at governance, risk and compliance activity as a checklist or a tick box, or using swivel chair compliance, we call it, where you're using lots of disparate sources. You've got to bring it all together, ideally in one place. So you've got the data coming through, the management information coming through about all this area, and some of many moving parts. So it's hard to do, but if you can do that and have all the data accessible to you, then you're going to be in really good space with the consumer duty to showcase that you're complying, or what you're doing to ensure that you're meeting the requirements going forward. The outcomes focus is not really a new concept. Outcomes focus has been, been around for quite a long time across industries, but certainly in a highly regulated industry as the financial services industry in this country, what it might be worthwhile doing is taking a look at what we call a logic model, which is what we apply at Model Office. So really, it's about moving away from the days where you were mapping the rules against what you're up to. And that's pretty much where it was finalized. It's now starting off with those examples. What are the good outcomes that your clients are getting from your services and products, mapping that back to the regulations and showcasing that you have the data on that, and that you can showcase to the regulator that their clients are getting good outcomes. But the problem is, it doesn't stop. Nothing stops. It's on an ongoing basis. So you need to prove on an ongoing basis that you're getting good outcomes from your clients. And so from that point of view, you're going to need the data, and you're going to need data across your business, your staff, your systems and controls, your policies, the way you are engaging your clients, survey your clients, survey or communicate clearly across the distribution chain and so forth. So we'll cover all that today, but it's all in, the most important thing here is that we're recognizing what this shift means and what data points that you're going to need to showcase and evidence that you are complying. So really what we've got is to coin a phrase, a new line of duty. And although I never watched the line of duty, I thought this was quite applicable to today's session. And really it's about, ideally the FCA applying this proportionately and looking at what firms are doing. The vast majority, and all you on today's call, are doing great work. But it's ensuring that you're going above and beyond and evidencing that you're doing that. And the key area as well is obviously the FCA need to weed out who the bank coppers are and ensure that they are focusing on that and are making sure that everything is fairly proportional, as they have, to be fair, put in their business plan of 22-23 regarding outcomes focus, that what they want to make sure is that regulatory levies are more proportional to the laggards in the industry rather than across everybody. So that's something to be applauded. When we look at the timeline regarding the consumer duty, we've got lots going on, as you can see, but it started really in 2018 with the duty of care paper about potential alternative approaches that the FCA should be taking, which then was blended into the new consumer duty paper. It's important to mention that this has got a political element to it. So obviously what that really means is that once you get the politics involved, then things need to happen fairly quickly. So the problem that we see, or one of the problems, is that the time frame is quite a short time frame of implementation and transitional periods, as you can see at the end of this, where if you compare this to the operational resilience piece, you had the best part of, or you've got the best part of 5 years if it applies to you. With this, you don't. Although they have pushed out it from April to July next year, it's still a very short time frame to do quite a lot. So what we've then got is the deadlines that you need to be meeting. So obviously today's is all about October 2022 and how we can help you there, where in less than a month, really, you've got to evidence that you've got plans to assess the competency of your business against the rules. And that really is assessing the data, looking at how you're doing that diagnostically, and also how you're doing it from a gap analysis perspective, and then moving through to more project planning and implementation around completing your first reviews and plans to remedy any gaps. And finally, obviously, that you must have complied by July 2023. And obviously the legacy business piece, as I'm sure you know, is July 2024. So this framework will be hopefully very familiar with you now, regarding the pyramid that you've got there, with the principle at the top where it's new principle 12, where it applies to consumer duty, that supersedes principles 6 and 7. But the key issue with this is that the FCA decided to not apply client best interest rule. It's all about the good outcomes. Below that, you've got the cross-cutting rules, and then you've got the 4 outcomes. But the piece that we're interested in is on the right-hand side of this, about how this affects you as a business, and how you can start to make sense of it and apply it and get the right data moving forward. So from that side of things, what we're saying here is that ideally, the board of the business, and if you haven't got a board, if you're 1-man band, 2-man band, or whatever, that everybody has the right accountability and responsibilities, which plays back to the SMCR, where you've got prescribed responsibilities and so forth. But making sure they got the right people in the right place with the right skills, everything's communicated, but most importantly, everything's evidenced, and you've got the data to evidence it. So it's evidence-based practice is king right now. So regarding the board, that's front and center of this. The FCA did a whole piece of work back in 2013 and 15, which is really good stuff, which is all about how to avoid a dysfunctional board, and conflicts of interest on a board. Interesting case that came to light recently is AJ Bell, where the CEO stepped back. And the reason why was that it was flagged up by the FCA there could be conflicts of interest if he stayed on the board. So that was an interesting part to play, and that probably will become more evident across further businesses as this plays out. You've got domineering CEOs, you've got biases, you've got posts held by individuals lacking technical competencies, inadequate 4I risk set checks, you've got poor understanding of aggregate risk, which we'll talk about in a little while, about risk planning with this, and decisions made on the fly or the hoof, and are they evidenced? And you've got the whole framework that's come through from the regulator about D&I, diversity and inclusion, at board level as well. So lots that's changing here, but the board has a front and center role of this, or individuals within that, and you've got the consumer duty champions as well. Bit of a conflict, an interesting area around this is that how can you have a consumer duty champion that's a NED when a NED should be completely independent? And the problem with the consumer duty is that the NEDs will have to have full knowledge of the business, which NEDs don't necessarily have to have. If you think about a NED position, they're there to challenge the execs who have all that knowledge in the business. So I think there needs to be more fleshing out about what a NED role, non-exec director role, is on the consumer duty champion perspective. But really, it's people taking ownership for the consumer duty, showcasing they've got ownership, the right accountabilities, responsibilities, and it's all documented. Final piece is really about information communication, the distribution chain. Well, we'll talk about the distribution chain in a little while, but the key issue with this, again, is making sure that you hold your own responsibilities and you're communicating that across the distribution chain. A big part of this piece of regulation is product governance. If you don't know the prod rules, you should, because you should now be complying with the prod rules under MiFID II. And we'll talk about that in a little while. But the key issue is that the regulatory paper that came out, the final rules and the guidance that came out with the consumer duty, is the fact that they are stipulating if you don't comply with prod, you're not going to comply with the consumer duty. So prod is front and center of this piece of regulatory directive. So what's changed? Well, obligation of firms to notify the FCA on an annual basis regarding the consumer duty, and breaches in the distribution chain. So more ownership. I feel for the planners, the IFAs, the wealth managers on this call, because you are front and center of this. You're kind of like looking at it both ways. You've got the client issues and you've got the rest of the participants in the distribution chain to manage. So that's kind of crucial. If you are building your own products as well, so if you're deemed as a product manufacturer as well as a distributor, then vertically integrated firms have some of that going on. So that means that you hold both responsibilities, which is quite a heavy duty to bear. So that's an interesting one. Firms to notify other firms in the distribution chain if they think they've contributed to causes of harm. So again, monitoring, getting the data on that, making sure your communication channels are right across the distribution chain is going to be crucial. A regulated firm buying a book of business, so M&A activity that I've mentioned, is going to be kind of like under the spotlight here. And certainly acquirers, we believe, are going to have a better handle on good outcomes that the end clients are going to receive through that acquisition process. That's going to be an interesting part to play through this. FCA clarified the situation regarding compliance and accordance with prod. Talked about prod. I'll talk about that a little later. And proportionality is part of this, which is great. So the fact is that if you're a smaller business, then you're going to have less onerous tasks to complete on this, but you're still going to have a fair bit to do. So I wouldn't get complacent from that point of view. We do see challenges. Talked about the implementation period before. Fair value, foreseeable harm, all a bit woolly, subjective. Reasonable tests, that needs to be played out a bit to understand what the regulator are coming at from that perspective. Client journey, good outcomes, focus. What does that actually mean? Are you mapping your client journeys? Do you have multiple client journeys? You probably do, because you have different clients at different stages in their investment path, their retirement paths and so forth, protection, mortgages, whatever. Relationships with other regulators, pension regulator, you've got other professional bodies like FOS and so forth. Talk about that a little bit later. Scale of change and cost. Will that be passed on to clients? We probably think it will do. It's going to be quite costly for this to be implemented. So that's an interesting one. And then you've got distribution chain, MI and data. You've got key issues there. regarding, pension crystallization events. You've got clients needing income. You've got clients needed, distribution of capital, of switching, and so forth. Are there going to be barriers and blocks in there? Are the communications clear and timely? And all that comes into play, and you're going to have to take ownership of that, being at the distribution end to the clients. Assessing product governance and value across the chain. Again, there needs to be lots of MI across the distribution chain and data across that, and looking at is the advice gap recognized? You've probably heard in the press recently, the FCA are now going to readdress the advice gap through simplified advice and guidance and advice and so forth. That's re-looking at work that they did under the FAMA review in 2015-16. So that's going to be an interesting one as well, how that plays out. So let's take a look at the 4 outcomes. The first outcome is really all about, in our view, product governance. So if you know prod is all about the product manufacturers first and foremost, and looking at are they targeting the right clients? Do they know the knowledge, experience, the ability of client bearing losses, client objectives and needs, risk appetite, and the distribution channel? And are the products going to be distributed in the right way through the distribution channel, and how they monitor that? And conversely, for distributors, which are the wealth managers, planners, wealth and advisors, similarly, they have to look at it from an advice suitability perspective and the client good outcome perspective. So, how is that playing out from that perspective? So there's lots of moving parts in here, and really what we've got to look at is what is a good outcome. What is deemed as a good outcome across the product governance rules. How does that play across the funding management, investment manager, the platforms, the advisors, and the investors, and looking at, are products performing as well as expected? If they're not, and what do you do about it? If clients aren't receiving good outcomes, how do you measure it? How do you manage that? How do you identify it? How do you monitor it? How do you change? There's lots to be factored in here, but you need to be showing that you're taking proactive action on all these, and you've got the evidence to showcase why you're taking that action. So that's going to be kind of really important. So the customer journey, mapping that out, and client segmentation is kind of crucial here. When it comes to the distribution chain, as you can see here, we've got an example from the fund manager, investment management platform, advisor firm, and investor in this particular case. And there's been lots of great work on this, going way back now. I mean, Holly McKay, when she was at the Platform, producing really good stuff around research and due diligence on platforms. You've got the guys at the Lancat doing really good work. They've got a great tool called Platform Analyzer, which pulls out really good research and due diligence data points on platform providers and relevant funds and so forth. So really what we're interested in here, or what the FCA really are interested in here, is looking at, have you done the due diligence around the service and the costs and charges, the financial stability, the platform supports, investment proposition provided? Does that match your client segmented needs on an ongoing basis and provide them with good outcomes? What communications are coming out? Is it client focused? As I mentioned, if you've got problems and barriers between clients saying they want to receive an income from their pension in this date, and then you've got an unreasonable lag on that, how is that going to be addressed? How are you monitoring it? How are you getting that data? What are you doing proactively to make sure that that's addressed? You've got the co-manufacturers piece, as I've mentioned, and you've got all the key issues regarding suitability and appropriateness. You've got the stuff around written agreements. Who owns the client? So there's a whole piece here, I guess, around the agent as a client rule, COBS 2.4 to be exact, and that's an interesting one. Looking at that, firms must consider if they're retail, clients at the end of the distribution chain, and if they can determine their material influenced the outcomes for them. So, and where this is the case, then obviously they've got to comply with the duty. So it's who owns that client piece, which is really important. Who does what for the client, and who's responsible and accountable for it all. And each firm's duty in the distribution chain must be commensurate to its role. So it really needs to be looking at the impact of its actions, its behaviors on each other, and how that affects the end client and obviously the outcomes. So having all that data and MI on all that is going to be really crucial going forward. So, providing, for example, a RAG rated system across all those research and due diligence areas is going to be something that we'd highly recommend. When it comes to the fair value piece, this is quite a busy slide, but really the reason why this is busy is it's very subjective and it's quite difficult and tricky, because you've got the rules are all about measuring fair value. How do you do that? What does fair value actually mean? A lot of you will do really good work around assessing our clients getting value from your services. Again, it's going above and beyond on that. And are you surveying your clients annually? Are you getting really good data on their experience with you? How's that being factored into how you're developing out your services? Are you adding more digital services to those clients who want more digital, and so forth? So you've got the whole thing around the distribution chain that we've talked about regarding the costs and benefits and so forth. Not setting the same service and product price for clients because they'll be at different stages, as I've mentioned before, in their journey. So segmentation is crucial, which we'll talk about. Are products, services, prices fit for purpose? Are the non-financial costs factored in? So, for example, data acquisition within the business. If you've got M&A activity going on, how's that going to affect your clients? And senior management are accountable. Again, it comes back to that board or the senior people in the business, and what you're accountable for the outcomes of the price and getting those value assessments in. And should you withdraw services, as I mentioned, and products if they're not offering good outcomes? That's going to be kind of really crucial. And engaging clients in their views, experiences, and their outcomes, looking at what fair value actually means, and are they getting value on an ongoing basis, which again comes down to the reasonableness of your prices, your charges, your remuneration strategies, looking at how you're pricing, and key areas around looking at delegating, outsourcing, that distribution chain MI that we talked about before. And really what we're talking about here is there's lots of great work that's been done already by the regulator. So why reinvent the wheel? There's lots of great papers that are out there that you can access instantaneously and look at individual in these individual papers. They have good outcomes. So FG 1216, one of the best papers I think that's ever been produced by a regulator, which was the FSA at the time, which is all about really assessing suitability replacement business, robust risk systems and controls around that, cost and benefit analysis, how to do that, segmenting your clients and so forth. The advisor charges and services, TR 1421 was a really good paper looking at how firms are recommended to set out their charging structures and segment them on an ongoing basis and make them clear and concise and understandable. Looking at the supervision review report that came out, looking at client suitability needs, should be adequately and consistently evidenced. So there's nothing new here, but it really is well worth revisiting all these papers. There's more as well. So we've got TR 16.1, again, I think one of the best papers produced, which is all about research and due diligence around your investment wealth management committee, boards, systems and controls, assessing the cost, the client best interest, which is now good outcomes, segmenting the client again, client bank again, and looking at challenging your business, challenging the status quo. The asset management market study, again, another good piece, as well as the vulnerable customers piece as well. But there's other papers in there. There's fair pricing, which was FS 19.4. There was 11.5, FG 11.5, which was assessing suitability, establishing the risk criteria, risk assessment criteria for your clients and assessing tools in the marketplace. Really good paper. Smarter communications, consumer communications paper, 1610 that came out, and strengthening FinProm, high risk review, investment platform study, which is ongoing at the moment, financial lives study, which is a good piece of research by the regulator in 2020, but lots of good data there that you can assess regarding segmenting your clients. And building operational resilience was another good piece of regulatory directive that came through this year. When we're talking about client segmentation, really here, It's all about understanding where your clients are in their journey and realizing that one size doesn't fit all. So really what we're talking about here is segmenting your clients and then putting any subsegments in as appropriate, mapping out investment solutions, platform selections, advisory services, costs and charges, not forgetting vulnerable customers. It's really classed as clients in vulnerable circumstances. So the interesting thing here is really clients can move in and out of vulnerability across these segments. So you've got here areas, surrounding, older clients, for example. Have they been bereaved? Are they needing income? Are they needing equity release? Do they have mental, physical disabilities across the age spectrum? Who knows? There's all sorts of vulnerabilities that clients can unfortunately suffer from. So again, factoring that into your client segmentation is going to be really important, because it will then obviously have a significant effect on good outcomes going forward, as it will across all your client segments. So really, it's also about marketing material, getting the right documents to clients, the right communications, factoring in behavioral biases, as we'll talk about in the next slide, and looking at, you're providing demonstrable comfort to clients getting good outcomes through those services and products that you've got in your segmented piece. When it comes to behavioral biases, you may remember back in 2013, the FCA produced, were launched really on behavioral economics, and that still applies in more ways than one. And we all unfortunately suffer from, detrimental decision making to our everyday lives, and our biases, can be identified and can be managed, and they can be managed by segmentation. And you can apply it to your client segmentation strategy, and you can assess your clients' behaviors through surveys and through how they're interacting with your services, so their propensities to buy certain products, their sensitivities to costs and charges, and so forth. But here what we've looked at is just a segment across clients' behaviors, looking at what their financial needs may be and strategies to engage them. So self-directed, which they want to take their own decisions. It could be they're valuing speed of service and self-control, and how you're putting together a strategy for it. It might be more digital strategy, validators, tailored information, reassurance, advice, value, delegators, delegating everything to you. So personal planning, coaching, trusted relationships, and avoiders, head in the sand. Simplicity, clear communications, making it easy for them, can encourage them to take action and engage with your services and the good outcomes that they need. So the final outcome really is all about determining, consumer support. And this is all about your client value proposition, looking at, in this particular instance, service, reliability, credibility, intimacy, breadth of professional and personal engagement. 4 areas there that we're looking at, which is what is available to, clients, intermediaries, and how accessible is that, what information is available, ensuring your communications are understandable, and that clients can evaluate their options, what the risks and costs are, consider the purpose and context for your communications, factor in financial promotions rules, and review and test and scope for harm if information is misunderstood. So that's a lot of testing, a lot of surveying, a lot of understanding your clients, getting close to your clients through your fact finding as well, understanding about and evidencing all that in one particular area is going to kind of be crucial. So avoiding uneven support, for example, between service channels is going to be important as well, and the client segmentation piece will help with that too. I'd like to just focus on some individual areas which may well be relevant to you. First area, regulatory areas, ESG, environmental, social, and governance data. If you're involved in this and you've got clients who have sustainability preferences, well, you'll see from MiFID II, the new MiFID II advice rule, that advisors now are having to expand their suitability requirements, assessment requirements, to ascertain investors' sustainability preferences. So there's lots of work to be done around that, and that is going to be factored into the UK, because the City Minister has already said that they want that MiFID II directive to come through to the UK retail financial services market, and incorporate those sustainability preferences into portfolio recommendations, disclose and evidence how sustainability risks are considered, explain and evidence how sustainability risks might impact returns, and on what data on how remuneration policies are consistent with integrated sustainability risks is going to be important. So that's a real piece that is ongoing, and really it's getting a better understanding of clients' sustainability preferences, which is going to be crucial to this, to their good outcomes in this case. Then you've got resilience, operational, financial, cyber now, where the operational piece comes in. Obviously, many of you wouldn't have to jump through those regulatory hoops because you're not a SMCI enhanced firm, but it's deemed as good practice. So it's well worthwhile looking at and applying to your business, and it will help you showcase that you're doing all the good stuff within your business regarding consumer duty good outcomes, because it's all about important business services and making sure that you've got controls in place, impact tolerances in place, and mapping out scenario testing in case things go wrong. God forbid you get a blackout within the business, how that's going to affect your clients' good outcomes, and how you're going to prepare for that is going to be crucial. When the financial resilience data is interesting, because what we've got here is a whole piece around KPIs. Now, quite why the regulator are doing this when they've got all the RMAR data. I think they produced about 7 financial resilience questionnaires now, but at the end of the day, they're really interested in post-pandemic, how firms have come through that, how it's affected their liquidity, any issues with income, effect on staff and retention and loans and so forth. And then the final piece is cyber resilience, which really is about are staff fully trained on it. It kind of plays into the operational resilience piece, but really it's all about GDPR as well, readdressing that and ensuring that you've got backup, breach and incident response strategy. And most importantly, across all this, it's all evidenced. So again, RegTech can help with that. It can bring all that data together so you've got it in a dashboard that you can showcase that you're doing really good work. And finally, but not least, on the cyber resilience, you've got insurance in place, which is kind of crucial. Some on this call are appointed reps, restricted advisors as well. And from that side of it, you've got a whole piece that's come through from the regulator at the start of this year, which is effectively a paper that came out, which is CP 2134, which is about improving the appointed representative regime and new due diligence oversight requirements for principals, and enhanced guidance on supervision for member firms as well and principals. So that's a whole piece that's come through, which again plays into the consumer duty because it's all about accountabilities, responsibilities, and good client outcomes. So that's again a piece that appointed representatives and their principals can apply to the consumer duty to showcase that they're doing good work and evidencing that they are meeting the requirements. Great piece of work that the FCA produced over the last 5 years is called the 5 Conduct Risk Questions, where they looked at 5 key areas. And it's something that you can apply your business tomorrow from a risk management perspective, which kind of is crucial. So looking at identification of the risks, the roles, responsibilities, communications within the business, outside the business, informed consent from the clients, breach policy is kind of crucial there. So looking at where those risks are, RAG rating them, looking at all the risks on an ongoing basis, empowering individuals' accountability, managing business risk, looking at accountabilities, responsibilities, all that good SMCR stuff, prescribed responsibilities, client outcomes in there, and then what mechanisms you've got to improve risk management, digital tools, RegTech, FinTech. We talked about, research tools. You've talked about attitude to risk, passive loss, client portal, and obviously governance, risk, compliance tech like ours. Training and development is important. Training and competence is important, and all the data that goes with that. And then looking at strategic oversight for the investment committee, board level, individual level. We talked about that, and avoiding a dysfunctional board. And then finally, but not least, looking at all the areas that can undermine all the great work that you're doing. And that is not to be underestimated, because that's a bias. It could be a blind spot. So it could be complaints data. It could be root cause data. It could be remuneration. And it's out of sync with the value that clients are getting from your products and services. So lots to factor in here, but this is a really nice framework that you can actually apply to your business tomorrow within your planning for your consumer duty diagnostic and gap analysis phase. We all outsource. I thought it was important we mention outsourcing today, because At the end of the day, we've got to ensure that we've got clear ownership and of the relationships inside and outside our business, defining the roles, responsibilities, who does what, how that crosses over. So that distribution chain piece again, you're outsourcing there. So ensuring that you've got all those roles and responsibilities mapped, all the contracts are clear, the documentation is clear, who does what, who owns the client relationship. The service level agreements are understood. You've got the timeframes in place. All the reporting is clear. Any escalation, everybody knows the systems and controls around that. And you've got clear and identified and agreed. You've got KPIs and KRIs. So you've got the risk indicators and the performance indicators clearly agreed, mutually agreed across all parties in distribution chains, for example. Service review meetings, again, and periodic regular review meetings, again, all factored into this, because the principle with this is knowing who does what within the value chain or the distribution chain, and everybody has those roles, responsibilities mapped out, and then you can evidence that, if you're ever challenged by the regulator or compliance consultants going forward. Moving to data, really, the important thing here is ensuring that you've got the right data stack within your business. Lots of firms kind of still haven't quite got there with this yet, but everything in red is really what you should have really for the consumer duty perspective across marketing, advice, service, and compliance. And certainly, if you've got practice management solution, back office, really what we mean that by practice management solution is a back office technology. You've got risk technology, client portal technology, CRM technology, activity management, client engagement, survey software, looking at RegTech as well through the channels there, the audit, the governance risk, T&C, KYC, AML. All these elements are really important to bring together because, as I've mentioned, the regulator want firms to move away from swivel chair compliance, where they've got lots of disparate sources, lots of spreadsheets and so forth, to bring it all together into one place. So, technology can talk now, it can dovetail in through APIs, application programming interfaces, and as long as you've got good data feeding through and it feeds through and it's instantly accessible, then you're going to be in a really good position. So addressing your tech stack is going to be more important than ever before, making sure the tech talks and it brings through meaningful dashboards that you can access, and then they're heat mapped and you've got the gap analysis to hand, and it's dynamic, it changes as the rules change, which is what we do at Model Office. The bias thing, is really important. Richard Feynman, came out with this wonderful quote about the fact that we're still easily fooled. We still suffer from biases. And, when it comes to data, well, data, you think Mr. Spock from Star Trek and looking at things rationally through the data lens, it can help remove those biases, or at least identify those biases and make sure that we're making informed choices going forward. And that's really crucial. Evidence-based practice is front and center of the consumer duty to make sure that those good outcomes are sustained on an ongoing basis for our clients. So looking at client behavior, all these are factored into the rules that came out, the final rules paper and the guidance paper that came out from the regulator around the consumer duty, and what we see is important. So you've got all the, advisor T&C records. So, things like, breaches not taken up, complaints data, root cause data, execution only data, persistency records. You've got research and testing of the client experience, mentioned the surveys. You've got clients in vulnerable circumstances, what that data is telling you about their good outcomes, reviewing processes and policies for effective good outcomes. That will allow you to then identify where good outcomes aren't being attained and removing those products and services and replacing or tweaking. So there's lots here that you can factor in to the business. And another area which shouldn't be underestimated is the FOS, the ombudsman rulings that are coming out. So you'll have seen lots of the rulings come out over the last few years around advice suitability. And the areas in yellow here are kind of like really important, because if you look at the themes here, all about suitability, it's all about fact finding, it's all about informed consent, it's all about adding more color to your fact finds. Rory Percival will mention that a lot in his day. Soft skills as well as the hard facts, and really using those FCA good practice in the papers I mentioned earlier on, as well as the regulations, which is something that we benchmark into Model Office so that you know that you're on track. So looking at the direction of travel with, the FOS, the FCA, the FSCS, pension regulator, and so forth, they have a wider implications framework which they've got in play at the moment, which has looked at things like the British School Pension Scheme, mis-selling, and phoenixing prevention. So there's lots of examples here that you can actually access to look at the direction of travel from the regulators and professional bodies and so forth to factor into your business to make sure that you're going to get those good outcomes on an ongoing basis with your clients. So really finalizing from my side, what we've got is a phased planning process where you need to get to. So ideally by October, you should have got the diagnostic and gap analysis phase in place, which is all about identifying the right data, collating it, pulling it together. Again, our dashboards, which I'll show you in a minute, will allow you to do that. You've got engaging clients in their views, surveying their clients, looking at maybe focus groups, looking at your CRM data, your back office practice management data, pulling all that data through. Distribution chain, looking at all the market participants within that distribution chain that we talked about before, and looking at all the MIN data, the documents, the agreements, the outsourcing areas, again, pulling that through, and really looking at how that's tested and where that management information sits before you then start to move through the design phase and so forth, which Helen will talk about with regarding the project planning. And then you've got the implementation phase and assessing this on an ongoing basis. Now, we're going to be running more of these webinars through this whole process. We'll be running LinkedIn live sessions as well. So please look out for those, and we'll let you know when they're placed in the diary. So hopefully you can sign up for them. So thank you very much for your time today from that perspective. What I'm now going to do is I'm just going to very briefly go through the, just take a quick look at our platform. So hopefully you can see this on your screen. So what we've got here is just a snapshot of Model Office platform. I won't go through all the elements, but this is how we break down the rules and regulations into 5 distinct areas. Let's just go into engagement, which is really where consumer duty sits. You can see here the firm has already diagnostically assessed themselves against the key issues that the regulator wants them, all the areas that we talked about today, really, that they want to be, that they need to comply with. And they've scored a 35% on that particular area. We call them business functions. And then below here, they're getting dynamic resources, signposting about what they need to then do and think about to move forward. So they've got the heat map dashboard here, and then they've got resources that they can click on, and it will take them to areas that they might want to think about applying to their business. So this particular area is all about understanding risk management, risk strategy and planning within the business. So here you can see we've broken down the 4 outcomes in this particular case and showcased what firms need to start to do and then look at building that through into inherent residual and target risk, completion dates, who's responsible, what actions you're taking. And this is a Word document which can be, downloaded straight away from the system. And as well as the 4 outcomes in here, you've also got the issue surrounding how culture, governance, and accountability plays out, and the directives there from the regulator in their papers, and also relationships with other regulations. So SM&CR, how you're getting on there, T&C, product governance that we've talked about, and finally but not least, what data are you collating within the business, and so forth. And then when we're talking about gap analysis, what we have is an action tracker which allows you to go through all the rules and regulations once a firm has diagnostically assessed themselves. But here what we're talking about, as we've mentioned, is engagement and consumer duty in the business function. So you can see here are all the areas that require work, target remedy date before the October deadline. And they can click on these individual areas from a gap analysis point of view, and then they'll get opportunities to take a look at the individual key areas, check those off, add a status to it, add the person responsible for it, add it to the diary if they wanted an alert system, add notes, and gain history of how they've scored over time and update their answer. And then eventually, once they've done that, they can complete it and move forward. So they'll always have evidence that they've done and taken action on this. So that gives you an idea of how Mo works. We also have a chat bot here. You can see that you can add in details on the consumer duty and it will give guidance. For example, it will give our view on the data that I've just mentioned before on the risk and so forth, and also our guide as well that you can access from the system. So that gives you a good idea of how the system works from that side of it. What I'm now going to do is hand over to Helen, who will, once I've added on screen share for Helen, and Helen will take you through the project management side of the consumer duty. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you very much, Chris, and welcome. It's good to see everybody on the call today. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So just bear with me while we do a quick, hopefully you can now see that. So let me just bring up, there we go. So yes, Helen Clark from Mimblue Consulting, and I specialise in project management. So building on what Chris has been talking about this afternoon, we're going to see why, or talk about why we need a project to support this work on consumer duty. There's a lot to think about, as Chris has been talking about. So one of the key challenges we've got, and many people say, is why do we need a project plan? We already do this. And for the majority of you, you are. But it's that gap analysis. It's understanding where you need to be enhancing what you've already got in place. And why a plan? Well, you're likely to have several products and services that you're managing. It also depends where you are in the supply chain as to what you need to think about. But it's about bringing all those different actions together and looking at them as a whole. So you're not actually duplicating activity that you're going to have to be doing from an operational perspective. So if we have a look at the key deadlines, that's the first starting point. And as Chris has already said, you need to have your plan in place and signed off by your board by the end of next month, not long to go. You've then got that gap analysis from the 1st of November to the end of July next year. And that's for your current products and services. And that probably will be the bulk of what you have as well. Some companies will have some closed products which they can look at from 23 to 24. So the bulk of the work will be in that point. So if we have a quick look at the FCA timelines, you've got, yes, you're signing off that plan by the end of next month. Then you're looking at your current products and services and the actions. And that's going to take you up over the next 10 months. You may decide to have a look at the closed products at the same time, but either way, you need to start looking at those from August 23 onwards. You've also got your board reporting. There's going to be actions coming out of that. And it's not just complete the actions through, you've got the ongoing items that you need to think about, that green line towards the bottom. How are you going to be reporting? What are you going to be doing? Who's going to be doing that? So we look at the next 10 months in more detail. Again, signing off the plan. Then it's breaking it down into further activity, the government updates you need to think about, governance updates. If you're CM and SR, you need to think about the updates from that side as well. And as I said before, while you're looking at open products, you may want to look at the closed at the same time and have that holistic view. Then it's into the actual activity, and that could be reviews, for example, the client segmentation, analysis of actions, compliance ops, MI, data cleansing, and then the training. So it all ties into what you need to do ahead of the deadline and then what you're actually reporting through. Who's actually involved is an interesting one. I remember that when GDPR was being rolled out, there was a tendency to think that sat with largely the IT department and because of all the data involved. But like all these projects, it's more complex than that. Yes, compliance may be taking the lead, but you'll have senior management involved who's actually going to be appointed to oversee all of this. Compliance, yes, absolutely. Analysis, future enhanced audits and reporting. The operational side, you need to think about what you're actually updating from your process point of view, even down to your fact find and perhaps the soft facts, data cleansing. Then you've got your training, the marketing for the client communication side, and of course IT coming into the frame about any enhanced MI reporting and where that fits in the supply chain. So if we actually look at the action plan in a little bit more detail, coming back to trying to make this as efficient as possible, absolutely, you've got action plans already, but that analysis, you need to look at the different services. So we've got some examples here: client segmentation, system changes, and protection around client review and DFM. But across all of those, you're going to have similar actions. So you can see individual actions for the client review and protection. You're looking at fact find and soft facts that need potentially updating. So you may as well do that as one go. Similarly, the charging structure review may be needed across all your products and services. So while they're needed on an individual basis, what you're actually going out to the end client and producing to make sure it's comprehensive. It's about making it as efficient as possible. Like all these legislative projects, I sit down and have a look to see what can be done, how these can be run from a project perspective. So I've actually provided or produced, some template project pack documents. We've got a project plan, which is in Excel. You can amend it as you wish to fit your business. And there's also an analysis spreadsheet, which is based on what we've just been talking about, that silo, not just a silo effect, but across. Where can you get efficiencies in there? And for anybody who's actually on the call today, you've got a special discount code, 10%, when you use CD10. You can actually find the pack on my website, which is Mint Blue Consulting. So I hope that's been of help. I'm going to pass back to Chris just to finish off this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. That's great. So thanks so much for your time today. I very much appreciate it. And hopefully it's given an idea of how RegTech and technology can help, but also project planning and how far you've come, where you are, and maybe the next steps for you to get that, get the gap analysis phase and diagnostic phases completed. This is CPDable, so we will send out a survey post this, so you can actually complete that. And if you need CPD, please let us know, and we'll happily send you your certificate. And we have recorded this, so we will also make this available on all social media channels, and also we can email you a link to the recording as well. As I mentioned, final thing from me is we will be running a few more of these events over the period that we've got with the implementation period and the deadlines. So look out for those. We'll run a few more webinars, and we'll do LinkedIn Lives as well. So all it remains me to do is thank you again for your time and wish you a great weekend when it comes. Thank you.